Joining me now, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Gingrich, welcome back to the program.
It's always great to be with you.
So, what do you make of the discrepancy or apparent discrepancy between what the White House said was President Trump's reason for firing Jim Comey and what Trump later said in that interview with Lester Holt?
Well, I think that President Trump sometimes is like a quarterback who gets ahead of his offensive line so nobody's there blocking for him. He made a decision. He made it very quickly. They executed it very quickly. And I don't think they, frankly, stopped to bring in all the press people, brief them, talking about the White House communications people, brief them and get their, act clear. I also think there was a difference in emphasis. There's no question that the final thing which happened before the firing was the letter from the Deputy Attorney General, which is a pretty powerful 3-page outline of all the reasons that Comey needed to leave. On the other hand, I think the point the president's been making is that he had for a very long time been deeply dissatisfied with Comey. And remember, prior to their outrage that Trump had actually done it, there were an amazing number of Democrats who, starting last summer, had called for Comey to be fired. So you have a lot of hypocrisy underway here, as the very people who said Comey had to go now think Comey should stay because Trump actually did what they asked for. And I think what happened was that the communications people got caught without a complete story, and it was only, as Sarah Huckabee Sanders said earlier today, it was only when she personally talked directly to the president that she got the full story, and I think that would have frankly been to their benefit to have done that the very first day.
Do you think there was no one said this, but do you think there was a reasonable apprehension on the part of Rosenstein, Jeff Sessions, even President Trump himself, that Comey was capable of doing to Trump what he did to Hillary Clinton? That is, come out and say, well, here's a list of stuff I think he did wrong and might have even violated the law, but I'm not interested in a prosecution. Do you think that could have been in the back of someone's mind?
No, I actually don't. First of all, because I don't think there's anything that nobody has at any level has suggested any involvement of Trump. I mean, most people have said is of some of Trump's associates or somebody who was a campaign volunteer, or but you've had person after person, including the director of national intelligence and the former Democrat acting attorney general, who said there's no direct connection between Trump and any of this stuff. So I don't think that was the concern. I'll tell you, I had the feeling last week. I watched Comey on national television in front of a congressional committee, and he went through this. You've seen it. This anguished moment of that he was almost nauseated by this. And I thought to myself, that is not a director of the FBI. I mean, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation ought to be thorough, ought to be serious, and when they make a decision, they ought to live with it. And this was like watching psychotherapy on national television. I mean, it was just, to me, it said this guy's under such psychological pressure that he can't possibly be an effective FBI director. That to me was the final thing. Now, I think from the standpoint of the president, he had a long instinct that Comey was not doing his job, but that the decisive moment was getting the letter from Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who, after all, had been a 30-year career veteran in the Justice Department, had been acceptable to Barack Obama as the U.S. Attorney from Maryland, and had just been endorsed by the Senate 94-6. So he was a pretty powerful source of information. And I think that the instinct had been there. I think that's what Trump was saying on NBC News, that his instinct was to fire him. But I think that the Rosenstein letter was sort of the final straw.
There's stories today, I can't remember if it's the New York Times or the Washington Post, that through his deputies at the FBI, James Comey says that Trump, at a dinner the two of them had, demanded loyalty from Comey. Trump tweeting this morning, not true. You better hope there's not a tape. Who do we trust here?
I have no idea. I mean, to be honest, you're at a dinner, you're chatting. One guy hears one thing, the other guy hears another thing. As somebody who has taught history his whole career, I can just tell you that reasonable people, honest people, can go to the same event and have two dramatically different experiences. And so I'm not prepared to say. I mean, I think Trump values loyalty very highly. I think Comey's version, which is fairly self-serving, is what he offered was honest loyalty. Well, I don't think Trump's ever asked for dishonest loyalty. That's not the way he's operated his entire real estate and golf course and hotel world. But who knows what the conversation was like? And I think sometimes we get down into the weeds about things you probably can't ever know.
When the president says things that seem to contradict something he said the day before or a week before or something like this, does it undermine trust in him?
Sure, of course it does. I mean, I think one of the challenges he has is to learn that the very style that made him remarkable as an entrepreneur and that made him successful as a candidate, as president, may be counterproductive. That in fact, as president, he really is in a different business, and that he needs to slow down. As I said a while ago, I mean, if you're the quarterback, it's nice to go slow enough that your offensive line is ahead of you. And sometimes people have to learn this. Jim Taylor was a great running back at Green Bay years ago from LSU, and he was so strong. He was young, and at the early stage of his career, when he broke through the line, he would go and find a cornerback or a safety that he could run over just for fun. And eventually Lombardi convinced him it was all right to just score a touchdown. You don't have to go out of your way to do this. Trump's got a little bit of that in him. He hasn't quite relaxed and realized his greatest strength as president is the size of the team he brings with him. And if that team isn't in the huddle because there was no huddle, the team doesn't know what play to run.
So let's turn to this Russia collusion thing. Cheryl Atkinson lists of the alleged connections, and so does the New York Times today. And I don't need to go over all the details, but there's connections, whether it's banking or various Trump associates with various Russian people. Does any of that indicate to you reason to be suspicious that there was actual collusion?
Look, I am totally befuddled by this whole conversation in the media. Bill Clinton got $500,000 speaking to a Moscow bank. John Podesta's brother, Podesta was the campaign chairman, his brother has represented both a Russian bank with close ties to Putin, and his brother, they just amended their files in the last week to indicate they had been very aggressively lobbying for a pro-Russian Ukrainian president. The uranium deal that gave 20% of American uranium to a Russian-controlled company was made while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. You go down the list and you say to yourself, now tell me again what you think the Trump collusion is. I mean, it's bizarre how one-sided these stories are, and how they, I really think it's amazing that they've never had a full, thorough investigation of the depth of the relationship. I do think we as a country have a good reason to worry about foreign penetration of our system. And I think, you just said the former President Obama, if today's news story is right, he got paid $3.2 million to give a speech in Milan, which is fine. It's just kind of weird, and we have to recognize that. And let me say in advance, I've given speeches overseas. Lots of people give speeches overseas. But when you start getting into these connectivities and you start saying, all right, so if Bill Clinton is getting money while his wife is Secretary of State, should that concern us? If John Podesta was in the Obama White House, as he had been in the Clinton White House, and he ended up being chairman of the Clinton campaign, and his brother is a major lobbyist for foreign government, should that concern us? I think that conversation is healthy, but it ought to be about both sides, as opposed to, did Trump once sell a condominium to a Russian? My hunch is he probably did. I mean, Russians buy condominiums in London, they buy condominiums in New York. So that would be a commercial transaction. Does it mean anything? If I drink French wine, does that mean that I am automatically pro-French?
Turning to the Democrats for just a moment, I think their attitude is best summarized today in a piece by Peter Beinart in The Atlantic. And the summary is, yeah, we Democrats criticized Comey, but that doesn't mean we wanted him fired. And
No, but
therefore, we're outraged.
some of them actually said he should be fired.
Well, no, I know they like to forget that now. But does this outrage on the part of the Democrats wash, considering their criticism of Comey, not the least of which was Hillary Clinton's last week?
Look, listen, of course not. The fact is, if Donald Trump goes out this afternoon and says the American flag is red, white, and blue, Chuck Schumer's going to say, actually, it's fuchsia. I mean, whatever Trump does, there's an anti-Trump position, and the Democrats will get to it, and the news media will applaud it. I mean, at least half the news media wakes up every morning and says, I know Trump's done something horrible. What was it?
Yeah, and I see that in the headlines each morning, too.
Every day. The New York Times knows it'll be an anti-Trump headline. They just don't know what the topic is.
Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Gingrich, thanks very much for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Glad to talk to you.